In the last hour, Peoria Unified decided to put off a vote on bringing in an outside investigator to see if high school administrators knew two teachers were having sex with a student and didn't tell police.
Steven Sarabia is live. That board meeting just wrapped up. Parents, Steven, were really hoping that they would take action tonight.
Yeah, well, the board ultimately voted to table this discussion for a later time, and this was a very long meeting. There was a lot of back and forth, not just during public comment, but between the board members themselves. It boils down to this. There were those who didn't feel like there needed to be a third-party investigation because the police already did their investigation and that this would be a waste of resources, while there's other people who feel like they do need this third-party investigation because they need to focus primarily on that reporting aspect of this case. So this whole thing centers around allegations that Beck and Angela Burlaka, both teachers at Centennial High School, had sexual misconduct with the same student. Now, this incident only came to light when the victim's grandmother found an explicit video of Burlaka on the victim's cell phone. After our reports on this, many voiced concerns that this was seemingly a known secret at the school, and many people knew it was happening. In Arizona, anyone who works closely with kids must report any kind of abuse to law enforcement. Now, the board eventually voted to table the vote. However, the board president spoke about why she wanted the vote tonight.
I do not believe that this is the right thing to do. I am here to protect students over institutions. I think that's the question here, and I think that it is important to have a qualified independent third-party investigator when something like this occurs for the student safety at the school. And so with that, I vote no to tabling.
As for the teachers in this case, Angela Burlaka gave up her teaching certificate and Beck was fired. So far, no criminal charges have been filed, but the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office is currently reviewing the case. We also reached out to the State Department of Education, which could not confirm if they were doing their own investigation. And during this meeting, it did appear that the board wanted to talk more with the county attorney's office to see how their investigation is going and to see if it truly is necessary to have that third-party investigation. But for now, we're just going to have to wait and see how that plays out. Live at Peoria Unified, I'm Steven Sarabia with Arizona's Family.